Neugebauer is the chairman of that committee, and he joins us now. Thank you for joining us. You know, we've now seen Mr. Corzine in two different hearings. We've heard what he has to say. What are you expecting, or what do you intend to try to get out of him today that we have yet to hear?
Well, that's a very good question. You know, we set out in this process to really just do three things. One, to find out kind of where the money is that's missing for these customers. Secondly, to kind of look at what was going on in the corporation, the corporate governance that was going on. And thirdly, what was going on in the regulatory community. Certainly, as we begin to look at the corporate governance side of this, what we're seeing is that inside that company, there wasn't a lot of internal control. Maybe the competency level of some of the people wasn't good. And so, obviously, that's an important piece of why this company went broke.
Right. Congressman, we've seen Mr. Corzine dance around a number of the questions, in part because perhaps legally he has to. How do you intend to try to pin him down, if you will, in a way that others have not been able to thus far?
Well, certainly we're going to ask him to re-clarify his position on that and make sure he understands he's under oath and he's on the right record. But, you know, that's one piece of the pie. Mr. Corzine is certainly one piece of the pie. But secondly, within this corporation, what's concerning me is that the fact that Mr. Corzine basically was the chief executive officer, he was the chairman of the board, and he was their largest trader. And so the corporate governance within this organization certainly had a major breakdown. And he had people telling him that he may not have enough liquidity to complete this trade, and yet he ignored that and ultimately led to the demise of this company.
Right. Going into this hearing, are there any policy objectives that you think may come out of it or that you're thinking about?
Well, I think we want to make sure we understand completely what happened here, but certainly we see a regulatory breakdown here where some regulators were continuing not to talk to each other. We've had Dodd-Frank, we've had Sarbanes-Oxley, and what we're learning is you can't regulate behavior. But what we also want to make sure is that the promises that were made to us through FSOC and by the Treasury Secretary, that he was going to coordinate these agencies communicating with him. Obviously, that's not happening. This is a company that had over 20 people looking over their shoulders, and yet in the end, we found that some of the regulators didn't know what was going on.
Right. Is there any material that you've come into in preparations for this hearing that may be a smoking gun, that may be new information we haven't learned thus far?
Well, there's a lot of information coming in, and there's a lot more yet to come in. And obviously, we've requested a lot of documents. Some of those documents are slow to come in. Obviously, you've got a lot of people investigating what's going on here. And so probably we will have additional hearings as more and more of this information becomes available.
Do you have any insight into the comments that the chairman of the CME, Terry Duffy, made in the last hearing just 2 days ago regarding the fact that he believes that Mr. Corzine and others understood and knew where some of this customer money had been going?
Well, I find it baffling that they didn't know that this money was missing until that Sunday, and so again that talks about the corporate competency that's going on. That you have all of these people, the CEO, the CFO, and the treasurer. We don't know where the money is. That doesn't speak very well of what was going on inside that company.
But you have no clarification, given those comments that were made during that hearing. There's been a lot of confusion and questions, obviously raised by Mr. Duffy's comments, that Mr. Corzine was aware and perhaps directed some of the customer funds to be used on behalf of the company.
Yeah, and I think those questions will come up today to see if we can get further clarification of that. Whether we will or not remains to be seen.
Let's take Mr. Corzine off the table. You have a number of other people that are going to be at the hearing. What are you trying to get out of them today?
Again, we're trying to create a record here of what happened. Particularly, I'm concerned about what was going on in the regulatory community. Also looking at what was going on in far as disclosures of this company. What we find is that the disclosures of these positions kind of came late to the game, and so the question is should there have been more disclosures earlier in this process? So certainly we want to look at that as one of the areas.
Do you believe there was criminal activity?
Well, I don't want to speculate on that right now because we need to get the facts. But the fact is that this money is missing. It's troubling. It put a lot of farmers and ranchers and small businesses in a tight spot because they had to come up with additional money. And that's certainly a breach of trust. We're going to see whether it's a breach of law.
Congressman Neugebauer, thank you so very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
All right. We'll be right back with more from our guest host, Tom Steyer of Fairland.